If you grew up in a small town anywhere in this country between the 1940s and the 1990s, there was a store on Main Street with a red and white circle arrow sign out front. It sold your first bicycle, your family's first television, your dad's tools, your grandfather's hunting rifle. It wasn't a hardware store, it wasn't an auto parts shop, it wasn't an appliance dealer, it was all of those things at once. It was Western Auto, and it's gone now. Almost every single one. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The thing people don't understand about Western Auto is that it wasn't just a store. In hundreds of small towns across America, it was the only store. The nearest Sears might have been 40 miles away. Walmart didn't exist yet. Amazon was someone's unborn grandchild. If you needed tires for the truck, a lawnmower for the yard, a radio for the kitchen, or a bicycle for your kid's birthday, you drove to Main Street and walked through the door under that circle arrow sign. And everything you needed was inside. Walk in on a Saturday morning in 1962, and the first thing you'd notice was the smell. Rubber and oil and something metallic like the inside of a toolbox that's been sitting in the sun. The floors were wooden in the older stores, linoleum in the newer ones, and the aisles were narrow enough that you had to turn sideways if somebody was coming the other way with a box of spark plugs. Up front, they had the small stuff: batteries, light bulbs, fuses, electrical tape. Further back, the bigger merchandise: washing machines, refrigerators, television sets behind glass, all of them tuned to the same channel, all of them glowing that warm blue-gray that made you stop and stare even if you weren't shopping for a TV. Everything in that store had a Western Auto name on it. The televisions and radios were Truetone. The tools and lawnmowers and washing machines were Wizard. The tires were Davis. The batteries were Tough One. The appliances were Citation. The rifles and shotguns were Revelation. And the bicycles, the ones that mattered more than anything else in that entire building to every kid who ever walked through the door, were Western Flyer. If you are over 60 years old and you grew up in a small town, there is a decent chance your first bicycle was a Western Flyer. Red frame with cream detailing, balloon tires so wide they looked like they belonged on a motorcycle, chrome fenders that caught the sunlight, a tank between the seat and the handlebars that did nothing but looked incredible. Wide-swept handlebars, a coaster brake in the back that you hit by pedaling backwards, a carrier rack on the back where you strapped whatever needed carrying, heavy as a truck, slow going uphill, absolutely indestructible. You could ride that bike off a curb, through a ditch, down a gravel road, and into a creek bed, and it would still be rolling the next morning. Those bikes were built the way people used to build things, which is to say, they were built to last until you outgrew them, and sometimes longer than that. Kids would spend hours at the Western Auto bike aisle picking out accessories. Mirrors, headlights, taillights, speedometers that clipped onto the handlebars and ran off the front wheel, streamers for the grips, baskets for the front, everything you needed to turn a plain Western Flyer into the most important machine in your life, which at 10 years old it absolutely was. Some of those bikes are worth thousands of dollars now. A mint condition 1950 Western Flyer showed up on Etsy for $4,750. There is a Facebook group dedicated entirely to the X53 model from the 50s. People do not collect those bikes because they are rare. They collect them because they remember what it felt like to ride one. And at Christmas, the Western Auto store became something else entirely. Some locations set up Lionel train displays in the front window, electric trains running through miniature towns with tiny streetlights and little plastic people and cotton snow on the rooftops. Kids would press their faces against the glass and watch those trains go around and around until their parents dragged them inside. They sold American Flyer trains too, and inside was just as good. Sleds with thin metal runners that kids would grease with an old wax candle to go faster over the ice. Red wagons you could pull your important stuff around the neighborhood in, or load up with your little brother and send careening down a hill. Pedal cars and toy trucks and cap guns and everything else a kid could want, all stacked on shelves next to the Wizard lawnmowers and the Citation refrigerators like it was the most normal thing in the world. Because at Western Auto, it was. People still talk about those stores online. A man in West Virginia wrote about buying a Midland brand microwave from Western Auto in 1979 and said he is still using it. It still works. Another woman said she still has a Wizard sewing machine from Western Auto and it still runs. A man in Delaware remembered his father running a Western Auto for years and how at Christmas his dad set up the Lionel train display that drew crowds from all over town. These were not customers writing product reviews. These were people mourning something they lost. The whole thing started with $5. In March of 1909, a 23-year-old bookkeeper named George Pepperdine was living in Kansas City, Missouri, watching the Ford Model T transform America. Cars were suddenly everywhere, and every one of them needed parts: tires, spark plugs, batteries, transmission parts. Pepperdine took $5, bought 500 one-cent stamps, and mailed out promotional circulars from his kitchen table. His wife, Lena, helped pack the orders. That was the Western Auto Supply Agency, a mail-order auto parts business run by a young married couple from their home. By 1910, Pepperdine had moved into his first real office at 708 East 15th Street in Kansas City. A few years later, the first retail store opened at 1426 Grand Avenue. Then everything started to grow. Pepperdine was diagnosed with tuberculosis in 1915 and was told to move somewhere drier. He sold the Kansas City operation to a man named Don Davis, moved to California, and opened a Western Auto store in Los Angeles on March 16, 1916, his wife's birthday. He started with $4,000 in inventory. By the end of that year, it had quadrupled. Now there were two Western Auto companies. Don Davis ran the East from Kansas City, and Pepperdine ran the West from Los Angeles. Both used the same name, and both were growing fast. By 1920, Pepperdine had 11 stores, from Los Angeles to Seattle, and from Phoenix to Dallas, with combined sales over $2 million. By 1929, there were over 170 stores. The stock market crash hit the country hard, but Western Auto survived. The company tightened its belt, but it remained alive. Then, tragedy. On January 18, 1930, Lena Pepperdine, the woman who had packed those first mail orders at the kitchen table, died of parrot fever. She had bought 2 lovebirds on a trip to South America, and the birds carried the disease. George was devastated. 4 years later, he remarried, and in 1937, he did something nobody expected. In the middle of the Great Depression, he founded a university, Pepperdine University in Los Angeles, a Christian liberal arts college that opened with 167 students from 22 states. Yes, that Pepperdine. The same Pepperdine where kids pay $60,000 a year to study overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Malibu. It started with the man who started Western Auto with $5 and 500 stamps. In 1939, George sold his controlling interest in Western Auto to the Gamble-Skogmo Company, and he retired to devote himself to the university and to the church. He died on July 31, 1962, in Malibu. He was 76. By then, the two Western Auto companies had finally merged back together in 1955, and the brand had become something its founder never could have imagined. At its peak, Western Auto operated over 1,200 company-owned stores in cities across the country and more than 4,000 associate stores in small towns. Over 5,000 locations total in all 50 states, plus Puerto Rico and Guam, all operating under that circle arrow sign. The Associate Store program began in 1935, and it was the first franchise model of its kind. Local merchants in towns too small for a Sears could sign up to run a Western Auto store, using the company's name, products, and distribution network. It pioneered modern franchising decades before McDonald's made the concept famous. The company had 5 regional distribution centers. There was a seasonal catalog, thick as the Sears Christmas book, packed with everything from auto parts to furniture to appliances to dishes to toys. You could order almost anything you wanted except clothing. People in small towns would sit for hours flipping through those pages, planning purchases, circling items, dreaming about the Truetone console television or the Wizard riding mower in the spring section. By the 1960s, Truetone radios and televisions were selling in over 5,000 stores, millions of units. The brand ran from the tube era straight into transistor. Truetone radios, televisions, record players, hi-fi systems, tape recorders, car radios, CB radios, and even musical instruments, all made by name brand manufacturers like Admiral, Belmont, and Wells Gardner, rebadged with the Truetone label and sold through Western Auto. A lot of families in small-town America watched their first moon landing on a Truetone television set. And the Revelation rifles. Walk into a Western Auto in 1965 and you could buy a Revelation semi-automatic .22 caliber rifle for $35. Made by Marlin or Mossberg or Savage, just with the Revelation name stamped on the barrel. Millions of Americans bought their first hunting rifle at Western Auto. One man remembered his mother buying him one for Christmas in 1965 when he was 15 years old. Its primary use, he wrote, was to put food on the table. That was the magic of Western Auto. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't trying to be everything to everyone like the big department stores. It was trying to be everything to the people in its town. The one store where a working family could buy what they needed at a price they could afford on an installment plan if they had to, from a person who knew their name. Then Sears showed up. In the early 1980s, Walmart started expanding aggressively into small-town America. Western Auto's corporate leadership panicked and converted company-owned stores into what they called flag stores, selling nothing but automotive parts. The associate store owners refused. Their customers needed more than brake pads and motor oil. They needed lawnmowers, televisions, washing machines, and bicycles. The small-town merchants knew their communities better than the corporate office ever would. In 1988, Sears Roebuck purchased Western Auto. At first, it seemed like a lifeline. Sears brought Craftsman tools and die-hard batteries into Western Auto stores. But Sears was already sinking under the weight of its own problems, and it had no idea what to do with a network of small-town general stores. By 1995, Sears started converting Western Auto locations into a new concept called Parts America. Auto parts only. No bikes, no TVS, no lawnmowers, no Christmas train displays, just parts on shelves in a fluorescent lit box. Everything that made Western Auto special, stripped away. By 1997, fewer than 850 company-owned stores remained. The associate stores were the last heartbeat of the brand, still selling the full range of products, still serving small-town America the way they always had. Then in 1998, Sears sold what was left to Advance Auto Parts out of Roanoke, Virginia. Advance promised the associate store owners a great and long future in the tradition of Western Auto. It was a LI. Advance had no interest in appliances, bicycles, lawnmowers, or televisions. They wanted the store locations and the distribution network. Within a few years, they stopped supporting the associate stores almost entirely. Brands were discontinued without warning. Computer systems stopped getting updates. Shipments arrived with fewer and fewer products. Store owners found themselves buying 70% of their merchandise from other suppliers and simply hanging the Western Auto name on the door out of habit and loyalty. October 2003, Advance Auto Parts sent a letter to the remaining 300 associate store owners in 33 states. It said that as of January 2004, Advance would no longer supply merchandise and services to the Western Auto Distribution Network. A company spokesperson explained that the logistics of distributing appliances, hardware, home and garden supplies, and auto parts to independent dealers scattered across the country had simply become too much. Nearly a century of American retail ended with a letter. Some store owners said they saw it coming. The discontinued brands, the empty shelves, the shipments that got smaller every month. But knowing it was coming did not make it hurt less. These were not corporate employees losing a job. These were families who had run the same store on the same main street for 30, 40, 50 years. The Western Auto in Neodesha, Kansas had been there since 1940. The one in Siler City, North Carolina opened in November of that year. Families passed these stores from generation to generation. And one day a letter showed up and it was over. The headquarters building at 2107 Grand Boulevard in Kansas City still stands. It is a 12-story triangular building that was originally built for Coca-Cola in 1915. Western Auto moved in and put its sign on the roof. And for decades, that glowing sign was one of the most recognizable features of the Kansas City skyline. When the building was sold and emptied out in January 2000, the sign went dark. It stayed dark for 18 years while the building was converted into loft condominiums. Then in 2018, the Condo Association funded repairs, and on July 13, 2018, the sign was relit. It does not sell anything anymore. It does not mean anything to anyone under 40. But if you grew up riding a Western Flyer bicycle down a gravel road in a small town that does not exist the way it used to, if your dad spent Saturday afternoons in the tool aisle talking to a man who knew his name, if your family sat around a Truetone television watching Ed Sullivan or the moon landing or Monday Night Football, that sign means everything. It means there was a time when a store on Main Street could be the center of a town. When a $5 investment and 500 stamps could build something that lasted almost 100 years. When a man named George Pepperdine could start a company in his kitchen and end up founding a university that would outlive every store he ever opened. Western Auto is gone, but the sign is still lit. And for the people who remember, that is enough.